On the day Grandma Maeve passed away, my divorced parents, who had both remarried, stood over her coffin arguing about who would be stuck with me. In my past life, I felt sorry for my dad, Richard. I chose to stay with him, hoping to ease his loneliness. I even helped him pick the numbers for a lottery ticket that ended up winning a $10 million jackpot. But the moment he struck it rich, he bought mansions and luxury cars for my stepmother and step-siblings. Meanwhile, he refused to spend even a few $100s on painkillers for me. In the end, I was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor, and I died a slow, agonizing death in my cold bed. Reborn into this life, my dad was frowning and sighing as usual. Hazel, your mother married a wealthy businessman. If you go with her, you'll live like a princess. My house is already too crowded. There's just no room for you here. My mother, Eleanor, was casually looking at her freshly manicured nails. Her voice was icy. Richard, that's not fair. Kids make a house lively. Besides, the rules in my new home are strict. My husband's ex-wife left behind twins, and they are not easy to get along with. If Hazel comes with me, she'll be eaten alive. Hearing them push me back and forth like unwanted trash, I felt absolutely nothing. When they finally turned to me, annoyed and demanded to know who I wanted to live with, I silently picked up my battered duffel bag and walked over to my mother. Eleanor's face fell instantly. My dad let out a massive sigh of relief, a smug grin creeping up his face. But he had no idea. Without me there to stop it in this life, that multi-million-dollar lottery ticket would be left in his jeans pocket, thrown into the washing machine by his new wife, and shredded into useless mush. Having a second chance at life, I didn't care about the money. I just wanted to be comfortable before my time ran out. My dad shoved the rest of my things into my arms. He kept staring at his phone, checking the lottery drawing date, and waved me off dismissively. Don't call me unless it's an emergency. I've got a busy household to run. His mind was completely consumed by that lottery ticket. He couldn't wait to throw his useless daughter away. I didn't say a word. I just dragged my bag toward the Maybach parked at the curb. Eleanor looked at my pilled, oversized sweater, her brow furrowing with disgust. The back window rolled down, and Arthur's daughter, Chloe, pinched her nose in exaggerated disgust. Eleanor, is this the charity case daughter you brought from the countryside? Why does she smell like sour trash? From the passenger seat, her brother Ethan turned his head and gave me a cold, indifferent look. He didn't say anything, but the disdain in his eyes was loud and clear. My mother looked embarrassed, standing awkwardly outside the car door. She wanted to suggest buying me some new clothes, but she was too terrified of upsetting her new family. Arthur Sterling, my stepfather, saw her embarrassment. He closed the business document in his hands. Let's stop by the mall first. Get the girl some decent clothes. I lowered my eyes and nodded quietly. Following them into the high-end department store, the bright, sparkling lights hurt my eyes. Arthur asked the personal shopper to bring out several pieces from the new seasonal collection. My mother pulled me behind a clothing rack, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. Pick the cheapest ones. Don't look like a greedy beggar. Arthur is rich, but that money has nothing to do with you. Learn your place. Don't make things difficult for me. I watched her perfectly painted lips move, feeling completely detached. It had been a very long time since she had shown this much concern for me. Too bad this concern had nothing to do with love. I turned around and randomly pointed at a rack of clothes. Chloe strutted over. Seeing me look at a simple white dress, she immediately snatched it away, giving me a smug glare. I want this one. You don't deserve to wear something this nice. Eleanor immediately put on a fake, flattering smile. Of course. Chloe, it looks much better on you anyway. Hazel can pick something else. Looking at my mother's eager-to-please face, I silently stepped back. I just pointed at a basic t-shirt on the clearance rack. Arthur walked over and looked at the cheap t-shirt. He frowned slightly, then turned to the sales associate. Take that white dress, along with the other new arrivals, and pack them in her size. Chloe stomped her foot in anger. Dad, why are you buying her such expensive clothes? Arthur gave her a stern look. Our family isn't so poor that we can't afford a few dresses. Don't make us look cheap. My mother quickly chimed in. Yes, Arthur is always so thoughtful. She then turned and glared at me. Well, thank your stepfather, Arthur. I took the shopping bags. Thank you, Arthur. Half an hour later, we entered the Sterling family estate. The grand winding staircase and massive crystal chandeliers were breathtaking. The luxury penthouse my dad had bought in my previous life seemed like a tiny shack compared to this palace. But none of this mattered to me. I carried my bags and quietly retreated to the bedroom my mother pointed out. The room was huge. The bed was incredibly soft. I lay down and closed my eyes. A dull, throbbing pain was already starting to echo in my head. At dinner, my mother was desperately trying to teach me table manners. Hold your fork and knife like this. And don't make disgusting noises when you eat your soup. She was terrified I would embarrass her and ruin her status in this house. Chloe sat across from me, a mischievous glint in her eyes. She picked up a bowl of steaming hot soup and handed it to me. Here. Have some soup. Just as I reached out to take it, she intentionally let go too early. The scalding hot soup spilled directly over the back of my hand. Before I could even gasp, my mother was already shrieking. How could you be so careless? Do you know how expensive that rug is? Go to the bathroom and clean yourself up now. She cared about the rug. She cared about her reputation. She didn't care at all about my red, blistering skin. I wiped my hand with a napkin, stood up, and bowed slightly. I'm sorry. Arthur set down his utensils, his expression darkening. Chloe. Apologize. Chloe rolled her eyes. It was an accident. She just didn't catch it. Arthur's voice went cold. I won't say it again. Apologize. Chloe muttered a half-hearted sorry. My mother quickly tried to play mediator. Oh, they're just kids playing around. Hazel has tough skin, she's fine. Arthur, please don't be mad at Chloe. Arthur ignored my mother entirely. He slid a tube of burn ointment across the table to me. Go put this on. I took the medicine. Thank you. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, gently applying the cream. My phone rang. It was my dad. The background was loud with the sounds of a rowdy bar and glasses clinking. He took a drag of his cigarette, his voice dripping with arrogance. Hazel, your old man is about to be filthy rich. My lottery numbers are a guaranteed win. But since you chose to go with your mother, don't think you can come back to beg for a single dime of my money. I have big plans for this cash. Just stay out of my way over there. I rubbed the ointment over the blisters on my hand, my voice completely flat. Okay, hope you get rich. I hung up. Suddenly, I heard soft footsteps outside. My mother was standing at the door. She pushed it open, looking at me with pure suspicion. Don't go calling your trashy father. Don't bring his peasant energy into this house. It took me years to secure my place here. Behave yourself, and don't drag me down with you. I stared at her perfectly preserved face. Okay, I will. She seemed satisfied with my submissive attitude and shut the door. In the middle of the night, a migraine hit me like a sledgehammer. It felt like my skull was being split open. A cold sweat broke out all over my body. I pulled open my nightstand drawer. My bottle of painkillers was empty. Clutching the wall, I slowly made my way downstairs to find some medicine. The living room was pitch black. I walked toward the patio, only to find Arthur standing there, apparently suffering from insomnia too. He held a glass of red wine, staring out into the dark night. Hearing me, he turned around. Under the moonlight, he looked at my pale, lifeless eyes and spoke softly. Chloe's mother passed away when she was very young. That's why she acts like a porcupine. Don't take it to heart. He poured a glass of warm water, found a box of extra-strength painkillers from the first aid kit, and handed them to me. I took them and swallowed 2 pills. Thank you. He studied my ghostly pale face. When I was sick years ago, I couldn't sleep at all. The doctors told me I had less than 6 months to live. Every night, the pain made me want to crash my head against the wall. Even breathing felt like torture. Everyone around me was just waiting for me to die so they could split my estate. No one thought I'd make it. But I refused to give up. I dragged myself through chemotherapy and surgeries. And look at me now. I'm still standing. He turned back to look at the night sky. No matter how cruel the world is to you, your life belongs to you. Don't give up on it easily. For the first time since my rebirth, I felt a flicker of genuine human warmth. I gripped the warm glass of water. I understand. Over the next few days, life was relatively quiet. Under Arthur's warnings, Chloe stopped causing trouble for me openly. But she still hated my guts. Every time we passed each other in the hallway, she would deliberately bump my shoulder. Or at dinner, she would push the dishes she knew I disliked right in front of me. Ethan always watched from the sidelines, never participating, but never stopping her either. I didn't care. One afternoon, I came back from a hospital checkup. The oncologist told me that the tumor was spreading much faster than expected. I had 2 months left. At most. I pushed open my bedroom door, only to find Chloe rifling through my duffel bag. Ethan was leaning against the doorframe, frowning as he watched her. What are you looking for? Get out of there before Dad catches you. Chloe was stubborn. Mind your business. I just want to see what kind of trash she's hiding in here. She dumped the bag upside down. Several empty prescription pill bottles tumbled out. Along with them was a worn, faded photograph of my Grandma Maeve. Seeing me walk in, Chloe froze, clutching one of the empty pill bottles. The mocking words she was about to say died in her throat. Why? Why do you have so many of these heavy painkillers? She stammered. I walked over, quietly took the photo of my grandmother from her hands. I carefully wiped her fingerprints off the photo with my sleeve. Then, I swept the empty pill bottles back into my drawer. Are you done? My voice was as faint as a whisper. If you're done, please zip my bag back up. Ethan stared at the pill bottles, then at the photo of my grandmother. His eyes grew complicated. He stood up straight, grabbed Chloe's arm. and pulled her back. In a stiff but sincere voice he said, "I'm sorry. She shouldn't have touched your things." I stared at Grandma Maeve's smiling face in the photo. No need to apologize. Nothing lasts anyway. Those words seemed to strike a chord in Ethan. He looked at my dead, hollow eyes, his expression shifting into something unreadable as he dragged Chloe out of the room. The room fell silent again. A moment later, my phone vibrated frantically. My dad had sent over a dozen texts on Snapchat. "That stupid bitch put my jeans in the washing machine. The lottery ticket is ruined. It's all gone. Shredded into paper pulp. Did you know this would happen? Why didn't you warn me before you left? We're getting a divorce now. Pick up your phone. Get over here." Looking at the angry texts, I could perfectly picture his veins popping on his forehead. In my past life, I had practically burned my hands trying to fish that ticket out of the washing machine to save him. And what did I get? He abandoned me the moment he got the cash. I coldly typed back a few words. "I didn't know." Then I blocked him, silenced my phone, and threw it onto the bed. My head throbbed violently again. I popped 2 of my new painkillers and swallowed them dry. That evening, I went for a walk along the tree-lined path outside the estate. The fresh air helped ease my headaches a bit. Just as I turned a corner, a shadow blocked my path. It was my dad. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair was a wild mess, and he reeked of cheap whiskey. He grabbed my arm in a death grip. "The ticket is gone. My life is ruined. Everything is gone." He glared at me, spitting saliva onto my face as he yelled, "I remember you saying you were sick in your past life, right? You still have that illness now, don't you? Go tell your rich stepfather. He has millions. Get some money out of him for me. If you don't, I will stalk you every single day. Nobody is going to live in peace." I winced, trying to shake off his grip. "Let go of me." Furious, my dad raised his hand, about to slap me. "You ungrateful little brat. How dare you speak to me like that?" But before his hand could fall, someone caught his wrist midair. Arthur appeared behind us. He shoved my dad's hand away with immense force, shielding me behind his broad shoulders. Ethan stepped up from behind, pushing my dad back. "Get the hell away from her." My dad stumbled backward, nearly falling onto the gravel. Looking at Arthur and Ethan, his tough guy act instantly vanished. He didn't dare mess with Arthur Sterling, so he resorted to pointing and screaming at me. "You just wait. This isn't over." Arthur's eyes were razor sharp. "If I ever see your face near this property again, I will personally ensure you spend the rest of your life begging on the streets." My dad shivered, shrunk back, and ran off into the dark, stumbling over his own feet. Arthur turned to look at me. For the first time, he took my hand. "Let's go home." Ethan glared coldly at the direction my father had fled. Only after confirming he wouldn't dare return did he turn and follow us back. Back in the living room, Arthur was clearly displeased by the scene. His face was grim as he went straight up to his study to deal with work. Ethan dragged Chloe off to the home theater. Once Eleanor made sure they were out of earshot, she completely lost her mind. She felt that Arthur having to step in and handle her trashy ex-husband made her lose all dignity in this house. She rushed up to me, grabbing my collar, sobbing hysterically. "Why can't you just be invisible? Why do you have to ruin everything? Do you have any idea how hard I worked to get a scrap of respect in this house? You got here, and now it's all ruined. That pathetic excuse of a father of yours actually came here to beg. What if Arthur decides to throw me out because of this? Why did you choose to come with me in the first place? Do you just hate seeing me happy?" She got more and more frantic, her nails digging into her own palms. Finally, she went quiet. She pulled a credit card out of her purse and threw it onto the coffee table. "Take this money and get out. Go live in a dorm, rent an apartment, do whatever you want. Just don't come back here." I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, yet looked at me with such pure disgust. I had long since grown used to her selfishness and coldness. I forced a pale, faint smile. "Don't worry. I won't be an eyesore for much longer." My mother frowned, taking a step back in disgust. "Are you playing the victim again? I say 2 words to you and you look like you're about to die." Before she could finish her sentence, I felt a sudden, uncontrollable warmth rush down my nose. A thick drop of crimson blood fell onto the pristine white rug, bright and terrifying. Arthur and the twins had just walked back into the living room, catching the scene. Chloe let out a sharp gasp, covering her mouth. My vision began to blur. That familiar, tearing pain roared in my skull. Under their horrified gazes, my knees gave out, and I collapsed onto the floor. The emergency room of the St. Jude Medical Center was bright, sterile, and smelled of antiseptic and ozone. The double doors of the trauma bay swung open as 3 doctors and 2 nurses pushed Hazel's gurney toward the high-resolution CT suite. Arthur stood by the desk, his charcoal coat stained with dark drops of dried blood, his face set in a hard, dangerous line. Behind him stood Ethan, holding the small plastic bag of empty narcotic pill bottles he had snatched from Hazel's nightstand drawer. Eleanor was standing by the glass wall, trembling, her face pale beneath her heavy makeup. It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake, Eleanor whimpered, clutching her designer handbag against her stomach, her voice high and shrill. She's just anemic. She's always been weak. She did this on purpose to make me look bad in front of Arthur. Arthur slowly turned his head. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were filled with a freezing, absolute disgust. Shut up, Eleanor, Arthur said softly. Eleanor froze. In the 6 months since she had married into the Sterling family, Arthur had been stern, but he had never spoken to her with such flat, unadulterated revulsion. Arthur, I'm her mother. You're a disgrace, Arthur interrupted, his voice cutting through the hum of the hospital monitors like a razor. She was bleeding from her nose and losing consciousness in your living room. And your first thought was that she ruined your rug. The doors to the CT suite opened. Dr. Harrison, the hospital's chief of oncology, walked out holding a series of high-contrast brain scans. His face was grave, his brows pulled together in deep sorrow. Mr. Sterling, Dr. Harrison said, ignoring Eleanor entirely and walking straight up to Arthur. We completed the emergency angiogram and MRI. Arthur took a quiet breath. Give it to me straight, Harrison. Dr. Harrison mounted the dark blue scans onto the light board behind the counter. He pointed a silver pen at a massive, irregularly shaped mass in the center of the left hemisphere. Late-stage glioblastoma multiforme, Dr. Harrison announced, his tone heavy. It's a stage 4 malignant brain tumor. It has already infiltrated the motor cortex and the brainstem. Ethan's hand tightened around the bag of empty pill bottles until the plastic crinkled loudly in the quiet hallway. How long? Ethan rasped, his voice cracking. Dr. Harrison looked down at the medical chart, then back at Arthur. Given the extent of the vascular damage and the severe hemorrhaging we saw tonight, 6 weeks, Dr. Harrison said quietly. 8 at the absolute maximum. She has been managing excruciating, end-stage neurological pain using heavy-duty palliative narcotics, the kind prescribed for terminal hospice patients. Ethan slowly raised the plastic bag in his hand. These were in her drawer. All empty. Dr. Harrison took the bag, looked at the prescription labels, and let out a long, heavy sigh. She was taking 3 times the recommended daily dosage just to stand upright. The doctor whispered, I don't know how this girl was walking, talking, or smiling. The physical pain alone should have put her in a coma weeks ago. Eleanor's purse slipped from her fingers, crashing onto the linoleum floor. Gold lipsticks, compact mirrors, and silk handkerchiefs spilled across the floorboards. She stared at the light board, at the massive white mass inside her daughter's skull, her lips trembling uncontrollably. 6 weeks. Eleanor stammered, her knees giving out as she fell against the wall. No, she was playing. She was acting. She was just trying to get money for her father. Chloe, who had been sitting quietly on a bench in the corner, suddenly stood up. Her face was white as paper. She remembered the day she had dumped Hazel's duffel bag upside down, laughing at the empty pill bottles, mocking her for hiding trash. She remembered Hazel's dead, hollow eyes as she picked up her grandmother's photograph, wiping Chloe's fingerprints off the glass. Nothing lasts anyway. Chloe covered her mouth with both hands, a sudden, choked sob escaping her throat. She sank back onto the bench, her body shivering violently as tears spilled over her lashes. She had spent 3 weeks picking on a girl who was literally counting down the days until her death. Hazel woke up 12 hours later in the VIP hospice suite on the top floor of the hospital. The room was vast, quiet, and flooded with warm morning sunlight. Outside the window, the autumn leaves of the hospital gardens blew gently in the breeze. Her head felt strangely light. The throbbing, tearing pain in her skull had been reduced to a dull, manageable ache, thanks to the continuous 4 drip attached to the back of her left hand. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Arthur sitting in a leather armchair beside her bed. He was wearing a simple dark sweater, his glasses resting on his nose, holding a small silver frame. Inside the frame was the old, faded photograph of Grandma Maeve, the glass wiped clean, the frame polished to a mirror shine. Seeing her stir, Arthur set the frame gently on her nightstand. You're awake, Arthur said softly. Hazel looked at her hand, then at the 4-line. I'm sorry for ruining the rug. Arthur let out a quiet, tired sigh. He reached out his large, warm hand, covering her cold fingers. The rug doesn't matter, Hazel, Arthur said gently. Nothing in that house matters except making sure you are comfortable. The door to the suite opened. Eleanor stepped inside, carrying a thermal container of chicken soup. Her eyes were red and swollen, her designer dress rumpled, her usual flawless posture completely broken. Hazel, baby, Eleanor whimpered, her voice trembling as she rushed toward the bed, setting the soup on the table. I made you some soup. It's hot. Mom made it herself. She reached out, wanting to stroke Hazel's face, wanting to play the part of the grieving, devoted mother. Hazel didn't flinch, but she slowly turned her head toward the window, avoiding Eleanor's touch entirely. Her voice was as flat and cold as a winter morning. Please don't be loud. My head hurts. Eleanor's hand froze midair. It was the exact same tone Eleanor had used on her for years, cold, distant, treating her like an unwanted nuisance. Hazel, I'm your mother, Eleanor sobbed, falling onto her knees beside the bed, grabbing the edge of the blanket. I didn't know. You never told me. Why? Didn't you tell me you were sick? Hazel looked back at her. Her pale, sunken eyes were completely serene, devoid of anger, devoid of hatred, and devoid of a single drop of affection. I told you 7 years ago when I called you from the hospital, Hazel said, quietly. And you told me I was playing the victim. Eleanor's breath hitched in her throat. She looked as if she had been struck by lightning. And 2 days ago, Hazel continued, her voice devoid of any emotion, you threw a credit card at me and told me to get out so I wouldn't ruin your life. Every word hit Eleanor like an iron hammer, shattering her composure into bloody pieces. Arthur stood up from his chair. He didn't raise his voice. He walked over to Eleanor, grabbed her by her upper arm, and pulled her off the floor with effortless, terrifying strength. Get out, Eleanor, Arthur said, his voice dropping into a register so dark it made the air in the room freeze. Arthur, please, she's my daughter. Eleanor cried out. She was your daughter when she was healthy, and she was your daughter when she was dying in your hallway. Arthur spat, dragging her toward the door. You failed her twice. You won't fail her a third time in my presence. Arthur opened the door, pushed Eleanor into the hallway, and locked the suite. From the inside, through the frosted glass panel, Eleanor's hysterical weeping echoed down the quiet corridor, but inside the room, Hazel simply closed her eyes, letting out a long, peaceful breath. While Hazel rested in the quiet VIP suite, a storm was brewing in the hospital's main lobby downstairs. Richard, Hazel's biological father, had spent 2 days searching the city after being chased away by Arthur. When he finally heard through an old acquaintance that Hazel had been admitted to the city's most expensive private hospital after collapsing, his greedy, liquor-soaked brain instantly calculated a new opportunity. He marched through the glass doors of the lobby, reeking of stale whiskey and unwashed clothes, shouting at the reception desk. I am Hazel's father. Richard, he roared, slamming his dirty fist on the marble counter. Where is she? Where is my daughter? Arthur Sterling is keeping my sick daughter hostage up there. A crowd of visitors and staff gathered, whispering and pulling out their phones. I know my rights, Richard yelled, his bloodshot eyes wild with manic greed. She's my flesh and blood. Sterling Group owes me medical compensation. If you don't let me up, I'm calling the news reporters. Click, click. The heavy footsteps of 3 security guards echoed across the lobby. Beside them walked Ethan. Ethan wore a black wool coat, his expression cold and imposing, carrying the exact authority of his father. Behind him walked 2 senior attorneys from the Sterling Group's legal department. Richard turned, seeing Ethan, and immediately put on his aggressive street thug persona. Hey, kid, Richard barked, pointing a dirty finger at Ethan. You tell your old man to come down here with his checkbook. My daughter is dying in his house. I'm filing a lawsuit for personal injury and negligence. Ethan stopped 3 feet away from him. He didn't yell. He didn't look angry. He pulled a thick white folder from his coat and handed it to the lead attorney beside him. Richard, Ethan said, his voice flat and crisp. 3 days ago, you stole $5,000 from your landlord's safe after your lottery ticket was ruined. Richard's face went pale. What? What are you talking about? Yesterday, the attorney stepped forward, opening the folder. You attempted to blackmail Mr. Arthur Sterling by sending threatening text messages demanding $50,000 in exchange for not creating a public scandal regarding Hazel's illness. The attorney pulled out an official police warrant. Under State Penal Code Section 484, you are officially charged with grand theft, commercial extortion, and felony harassment. The police officers are waiting outside. Richard stammered, taking 3 steps back toward the automatic doors. You're framing me. I'm her father. I have a right to her money. You surrendered your parental rights 7 years ago during the divorce settlement in exchange for $10,000 in cash, Ethan said, stepping into his path, his eyes icy cold. You are legally a stranger to her. 2 uniformed police officers stepped through the glass doors, grabbing Richard's arms and pinning him against the marble pillar. Get off me. Let me go. Richard shrieked, kicking his legs, his face contorted in violent, pathetic panic. Hazel, tell them to let me go. I'm your dad. Ethan leaned down, whispering into Richard's ear so only he could hear. Hazel is resting, Ethan said softly. And if you ever speak her name again, will ensure the judge gives you the maximum 15-year sentence without parole. The officers dragged the screaming, sobbing man out into the cold rain, hauling him into the back of a police cruiser. Ethan stood in the lobby, adjusted his collar, and turned back toward the elevators, heading upstairs to guard his sister's quiet. The next 6 weeks passed like a quiet, beautiful dream. Hazel didn't stay in the hospital. At her request, Arthur moved her back to the Sterling estate, setting up a fully equipped medical room on the ground floor, facing the private botanical garden. The heavy, cold atmosphere that had once hung over the estate was completely gone. Eleanor was still legally Arthur's wife, but she had been stripped of all authority, credit cards, and domestic control. She lived in a small guest cottage on the edge of the property, forbidden from entering the main house, unless Hazel specifically asked for her. She never did. Every morning, Eleanor would stand by the edge of the garden fence, holding a cup of hot tea she had made herself, watching Hazel sit in a wheelchair on the sunlit terrace through the trees. She watched Arthur personally read the morning paper to Hazel. She watched Chloe carefully wrap a soft cashmere shawl around Hazel's shoulders, bringing her fresh wild roses from the garden. She watched Ethan sit beside her patiently, showing her old photographs of Grandma Maeve that he had managed to restore using digital tools. Eleanor stood outside the fence, weeping silently in the autumn wind, realizing that the family she had tried so desperately to build had finally come together, completely without her. One warm afternoon, the sky was a clear, brilliant shade of lapis blue. Hazel sat on the terrace, wrapped in a white wool blanket. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale as snow, but her dark eyes were clear, bright, and peaceful. Chloe sat on the stool beside her, holding a small silver bowl of peeled grapes. "Hazel," Chloe said softly, her voice gentle, completely free of her old prickliness. "Does the sun feel too bright? I can lower the awning." Hazel smiled, shaking her head faintly. "No, it's warm. It feels nice." Ethan walked out onto the terrace, holding a new leather-bound album. He set it on her lap, opening the first page. Inside were high-resolution, restored photographs of Grandma Maeve's old country cottage, the garden, the wooden porch, the wild hydrangeas, and a small, bright portrait of Grandma Maeve smiling warmly under the sun. Hazel's thin fingers traced the glass of the photo. "She was always smiling," Hazel whispered, her voice barely louder than the rustle of the leaves. "We bought the old cottage yesterday," Arthur said, stepping out from the study doors, sitting on the bench beside her. "We hired a team to restore the garden, exactly the way it looks in that photo. Next spring, the hydrangeas will bloom again." Hazel looked at Arthur, then at Chloe, and finally at Ethan. In her past life, she had died alone in a cold, dark room, listening to her biological father drink whiskey downstairs, holding a torn prescription bottle, wondering why no one had ever loved her. In this life, she sat under the warm autumn sun, surrounded by people who guarded her quiet, cared for her pain, and honored her memory. She realized that fate hadn't brought her back to save her life. It had brought her back to teach her that she was worthy of being loved. "Thank you," Hazel whispered, her eyelids growing heavy, feeling a deep, sweet tiredness settling into her soul. "Thank you for the home." Arthur gently took her small, cold hand in his. "You're home, Hazel. You're always home." Hazel let out a long, quiet exhale. Her head tilted slightly to the side, resting against the soft velvet pillow. Her eyes closed peacefully, a faint, beautiful smile resting on her lips, as if she had simply fallen into a deep, dreamless sleep. The terrace went completely quiet. The autumn wind blew gently through the garden, carrying a few golden leaves. Across the lawn, under the vast, unbroken sky. 1 year later, the Maeve and Hazel Sterling Foundation for Pediatric Oncology was officially established in the city center, a $100 million charity funded entirely by the Sterling Group, providing free medical care, hospice support, and family housing for children with terminal illnesses. A bronze statue of a young girl holding a lantern stood in the center of the foundation's garden. At the base of the statue were simple, elegant letters. Hazel. Forever peaceful. Forever loved. In a state prison 200 miles away, Richard sat in a dark, damp four-man cell. He was serving a 12-year sentence for extortion and grand theft. His hair was gray, his teeth rotting, his body broken by hard prison labor. Every night, he lay on his thin metal bunk, staring at the cold concrete ceiling, weeping in total obscurity, remembering the $10 million lottery ticket he had let his wife throw into the washing machine, and the daughter he had driven into an early grave. And in the Sterling estate back in the city, Eleanor still lived in the small guest cottage on the edge of the property. Arthur had not divorced her. He kept her legally married, provided her with food, shelter, and medical care, but he never spoke a single word to her again. She was an absolute ghost in the grand palace she had sacrificed her daughter to enter. Every single day, Eleanor sat on the wooden porch of her cottage staring through the iron fence at the empty terrace where Hazel used to sit in her wheelchair. She didn't wear her designer dresses anymore. She didn't paint her nails. She sat in the freezing winter wind, holding an empty bottle of painkillers and a faded, torn credit card, weeping silently until the sun went down, carrying the unbearable, eternal weight of a mother who had traded her child's life for a scrap of gold, only to be left with nothing but cold, silent ashes.